What does it mean to master the game of life? Like any game, it requires a fundamental understanding and application of the rules. But living in today's on-demand society is making this nearly impossible, as our attention is increasingly being fought over and monetized by others. Will Moore's mission is to help you hit the reset button by providing a new set of game rules based on time-proven universal principles and modern science to gamify your life by making it fun and addictive to replace your habits in the 5 core areas of your life proven to lead to true happiness. Ready, player one?
How's it going?
What's up, man?
I'm doing
I'm good.
really
How
good.
are you doing? Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thanks
for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Excited to have you on. Yeah, I've mentioned several times, when I've had guests, it seems like almost everybody that's in the space of, and I don't like the word wellness. I don't like the word self-help, right? I don't know. What do you use when you talk about, you're basically trying to help people? Well, what term do you use?
Personal development, I guess. But also
Tricky,
like
right?
self-improvement.
Personal
I feel like
development,
self-improvement
sure.
has
Okay.
more of like a spiritual meaning to it to me.
Yeah, I like self-improvement probably the best out of all those. Well, maybe part of the reason I don't like those words is because they have a negative connotation for me. Like when I was growing up, it was
Yeah.
always like, what? You're doing self-help? And it's like, yeah, I am. Anyways, what I was going to say is I feel like almost everybody I've had on the show, they've had like some major moment. And I always am like, God, like if only everybody could have this moment, like this big life-changing experience, because I had mine when I was in college and I was suicidal and I was like at my rock bottom. I had a kind of my rock bottom bounce, I call it, moment, and it sounds like you've had one. So let's get into yours, and then I like kind of what you talk about, where you talk about trying to help people create that powerful life-changing moment. So
Yeah,
let's start with your story.
Kind of takes us back to, it was 2013, and I was with a group of 10 other friends, and we piled into 2 separate cars. So there's a black Nissan Xterra, and there's a burgundy Toyota 4Runner, and I'm in the 4Runner. And everything's going fine until our friends in the Nissan clip our car, and that's when we start to fishtail. So we start to fishtail, we go one big swing to the left, another swing to the right, another swing to the left. And at this point, it's one of those moments where it's happening like all in slow motion. Like just, even though it's happening so fast, it all feels like very slow. And I remember whispering to myself, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die, over and over and over again. And it was silent until our car flipped. And so we slammed into the asphalt, and we start sliding across the 5-lane freeway at 85 miles per hour, heading straight toward the center divider. And I just remember all I could see at that moment were sparks. The doors were grinding on the asphalt. There were sparks and smoke filling the car. And that's a scent that haunted me for like months. There would be random times throughout my day where I would just smell metal. The burning metal would just come revisit me. And luckily our car stopped like just before hitting the center divider. I'm talking like, feet or inches. And at this point, the car is on its side. So I'm sitting behind the front passenger seat, which is now the side of the car that's facing up, which is very confusing after a very, swinging back and forth,
Right.
flipping, all that kind of stuff. You're kind of disoriented. And I have to orient myself quickly because I'm the first person to get out, because I'm the top of the car. And so I forced myself out of the car and jumped down the asphalt below. And I still think back, there's just like a lot of what ifs that still run through my head. Like what if there were cars coming down the freeway? What if we hit the center divider? What if we had no seatbelts on? Luckily, those what ifs didn't happen, but if they did happen, I probably wouldn't be on this live right now. And so that was my moment that showed me the fragility of life, and it motivated me to make the changes in my life to become the person I am today. And my biggest fear now is what would have happened if I didn't get into the accident, and if I continued to live on autopilot as a young college kid. So my gift was the accident, because it motivated me to make those changes and realize that this is my opportunity to, make the life that I want to make and live the life I want to make. So I see that as, that was a gift.
Yeah. I mean, it was a gift. You're right. I've said this before. It's kind of an oxymoron, but to say you're lucky, you are lucky. I was lucky that I had mine. Everybody that's had a moment that is kind of, and there's got to be something there, because I mean, it's like it's a common theme. Like I said, I mean, there's very few people that I've talked to that are in the space that didn't have just some either like near death or, you know, we're at kind of their rock bottom and we're like, all right, this is it, where it just changed their mindset and their perspective like immediately almost, right? Where, and then you just started seeing the world differently. And it's just like, God, how lucky to have that. And at such an early age for you and me. It sounds like we were similar ages, right? I was in college as well. And, you know, some people never go through that. And I call it, it's sort of like, I call it hovering above rock bottom, which I can't imagine. Like, it's like purgatory. There's no worse death. There's no worse thing, I guess I should say, than you're just sort of like humming along and your life's not awesome, but you feel like this is kind of how it needs to be. And, you know, you're got that fixed mindset where you are who you are, your brain is the way it is, you're meant to do what you're meant to do, and you know, you just got to get through the day. And eventually, if you just work hard enough and push through all this, you know, non-fun life that you're living, you know, you'll have a pina colada on a beach one day and be able to retire. And it's just like, dude, then it's too late. And by the way, there is no such thing, because when people, even at an older age, I mean, I guess, you know, if you're really old, you can maybe sit on the beach a little bit longer, but even at any age, you have to be moving. You've got to be growing in some way. You've got to be like, okay, this is what excites me, and I need to be taking actions towards it every day. And there's only so many pina coladas you can drink before you're like, there's no growth here. I'm just sitting, right? So how do you talk to people about creating?
Yeah, so I think my thing is like, most people are on autopilot. You know, I was once on autopilot. That's kind of like, I feel like that's where our baseline kind of returns to, without putting, you know, forth the conscious effort of trying to make improvements in your life, striving to become a better person, building habits, whatever that, you know, may be for you. And so my intention with my story and what I share with it is I want to create that wake-up call for people so they don't have to go through the tragedy. So they don't have to go through the crisis. They don't have to go through the car accident, because that's not a guarantee that will happen. And if you wait for something to force you to change, you might miss your opportunity to become the person you're capable of being, because it never happened to you. And so my intention is to inspire people through my teachings to start looking for ways to change your life now. So disrupt yourself now, initiate the change now, instead of waiting for something to happen to you, because we don't know if something will ever happen to you. And you might totally miss the opportunity because it will never happen. So the goal is to just disrupt yourself, disrupt your path, disrupt your habits, disrupt your thinking in a way that starts to propel you forward and create those small shifts that compound into those huge shifts over time.
I love it. Yeah. So how do you do that? Like, how? Because I feel like part of it is this like visceral experience that like almost has to be like natural, because it's like your brain goes, okay, none of this has been contrived. Like, this just happened, and holy shnikes, or holy shit, according to your book, right? It's like, what just, okay, like, we're on the wrong path. Like, everything we thought was important 5 seconds ago is just bullshit. Like, life is short. I could die tomorrow. Like, I could be, you know, like, what? So how do you create that? Like, I mean, what are some of the things that you talk to people about?
Initiating change in general, I break it down into 3 steps. So step number 1 is to lead with curiosity. I think curiosity is the foundation of creating powerful change in your life. You have to be curious about doing something different. And there's a campaign that Apple ran for 5 years called Think Different. And I think what was really important about that is them highlighting the importance of thinking different, getting outside of your normal path of thinking and doing something different with the intention of making a lasting impact to yourself or for others. You know, for Apple, it was obviously for the world and technology in the marketplace. But for yourself, it's to impact yourself. So asking questions, challenging your thinking, and even collaborating, looking to others for support to kind of think about new ways you can approach your life. If you're not happy with the life you're living now, or if you feel you're on autopilot and it's just passing you by, you know, there's got to be a different approach you can take to bring more intention into your life and start that domino effect of change. So curiosity is the first domino to fall. Number two is to get outside your
I
comfort
like
zone,
that.
which for me, that's what created the most change in my life. It was, okay, I don't like how I'm living. I need to do something different, but I know I need to get outside my comfort zone to really jumpstart the process of kind of overcoming the things that were holding me back my whole life. So for me, that was a trip to Europe. For most people, it doesn't have to be that, extravagant. It could be small things every day, that new things you want to try that you haven't tried before, but are just, on the edge, on the other side of that comfort zone to pull you outside, because that's where real growth happens. And after getting outside your comfort zone, it's number three is to take action. And action is a catalyst to change. And so if you never take action, nothing will actually change, which is why you can't just be curious and then, there's a quote from Jim Carrey. You can't just visualize and then go eat a sandwich. Things take work. So you can't just be curious and then do nothing. You have to be curious, and then you have to pursue the curiosity. And so taking action is really it's the final switch. It's the final domino to kind of initiate that change and to keep it going, because the compound effect, which is one of my favorite books that I've read early in my self-help reading days, I guess. And it's the idea that small actions repeated over time compound into something greater. So consistent action will create a greater potential for change.
100% right. I talk about the compound effect all the time. And I have this thing I call the equation of life. It sort of takes the compound effect, it sticks it right in the middle. And it's basically your belief system plus your repeated actions plus time equals who you will become. That actions part, right? So your belief system, that's kind of like, what's your mindset? Like, how do you see the world? Like, what's important to you? What are you trying to get out of it? Right. Then plus your repeated actions, like you just said, you can't just eat a sandwich and think about it. You gotta go and do it. You gotta take the action. Just like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, like sitting on a beach, drinking a pina colada, it sounds like the ideal life. Like if I could just retire and do that, but it actually isn't. It's not fun. We get bored and we're not happy. But taking action on those important things, that's the key, right? The things that are built around a solid belief system that are moving you towards the main areas of your life that will make you happy and that are important to you. And that's different for everybody. And I think where people tend to get caught up is, they try to get the answers from, other people's social media or reading books or whatever. And like, oh, that's what this guy said. That's what I need to do. I need to, okay, physical health. I know that's important. This guy's waking up at 6 a.m. and he's doing it. I need to do that, right? No, it's different for everybody. Physical health is important. Relationships are important. Your career and your finances, how you're expressing that, your emotional health, all these things are these main areas of your life are super important, but how you are expressing them, right? And how you're moving the needle and taking action on it is what's important, is what really matters, right? And at the end of the day, to me, that's your biggest job in life, is figuring out what is it that makes you truly happy? Like, who do you want to be? Where do you want to end up? What do you want said at your funeral? And then now, what are the actions you got to take every day to get there? And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, never get to that point where they realize what that is, right? And we're talking about how you can have a life-changing experience. Really helps to just flash forward you, because what that does is just like what I was saying. It's like all of a sudden you're going to the end of your life. Like, I almost just died. Like, what are people going to say about me tomorrow? If I were to die, like, what were they going to say about me, right? And then you're like, shit. And then but we're caught in this society, in this trap of like focusing what we think is important, and we're taking actions on usually revolved around notoriety, money, and that's what we think will make us happy. But if you just focus on that stuff, and that's what your actions are based around, then you're in trouble, right? So the action part, right? So important. So let's get into some of the things that right? So now your 3 steps: lead with curiosity, go outside your comfort zone, take action. Easier said than done. How do you actually get people to do this, right? Because again, this is like generic advice, like, oh, that sounds great, but somebody watching this, how can you actually help them to say, okay, that's a really good tip I'm going to take away, and I'm going to go and do that right now and start doing it and building the habit of it?
Let's see. The way I would frame this is, it all comes back to the curiosity point. That's the starting point where we need to focus on the most, because if you can't figure out step one, you can't make, 2 and 3 are never going to exist. So I've used what I call a curiosity bank in my own life, which helps me identify, the new areas of life I want to explore, the changes I want to make, the experiences I want to try. Because activating your curiosity, like I was saying, asking questions, challenging your thinking, and collaborating, it doesn't just happen by doing those things, but it happens by putting pen to paper. You have to write things down. And so I use a curiosity bank. It's where anytime I'm like, oh, that's interesting to me, or oh, I need to make that change in my life or my business, write it down. And so you create this like database of things that you can go after. And usually those things are outside your comfort zone. So that's just going to naturally lead you to step 2 without having to think about it, because all those things on the list are going to be existing in some sort of level of discomfort, just naturally, because they're new and they're going to require you to change. And so I think it's important to write those things down, because you essentially are starting to create a contract with yourself of ways that you can change your life. And so this tool, the Curiosity Bank, makes initiating change tangible, and it gives you a tool now that I'm passing the baton to you to go use that as a leverage point in your own life to make that growth and change. And so it starts with writing things down.
Yeah. So that's the habit right there. Right. Writing down, starting to take note of the things that are important. And then what you just said is so important. And it's like, I always talk about universal principles. It's like, they're these things that have been around since the beginning of time. They're going to be around until we destroy ourselves. Hopefully not, if we figure it out. But you can hang your hat on them. And one of those principles to me is this notion of basically always be growing. And then kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the pina coladas, like as long as you're growing, you're going to be happy. But what are you growing into, right? And so I like this habit that you have, which is, right, you write down the things that are just on the edge of your comfort zone that, fear maybe has come into play, and you've told yourself, oh, I can't do that. That's too far. But by writing them down and putting them like in actual black and white concrete, you're going, okay, well, that's what I know will make me happy to grow into. So that's where I need to go. And if I head towards that and figure out how to make it happen, then I know I'll be happy, just enjoying the journey part of it.
Yeah, I think another is just like kind of side tip, if there's people that are going to be using this tool, is the things you write down, you don't have to do every single thing. And I think that's important, because it can be really overwhelming or paralyzing once you start to use this tool and you're at, you got a list of 10, 20, 30 things. You start to think, well, which one should I start with? Which one will give me, the most impact, that create the most change? And my tip always is go after the ones that you feel called to go after. If you have a gut feeling about something, just go for it. Don't question it. Just give it a try and see what happens. And if it was the right change, you'll feel good in making that change, and you'll feel really connected to it. But if you notice it's not taking you in the direction you want to go, you can come back to, step 1, which is your list, and look for something else that calls you. And I think also with getting outside your comfort zone, your comfort zone starts with 1 step, not 10. And I think people think of getting outside your comfort zone as doing crazy things. So skydiving or bungee jumping or swimming with sharks, all the stuff that would impress other people. But the way I see discomfort and getting outside your comfort zone is that it's a personal challenge to put yourself in the slightest bit of discomfort to help you grow. And so when you're looking at your curiosity bank, just start with one thing, only one. Because when you take that step, you're going to start to create that forward momentum, just naturally. That's what happens. And I think, a lot of people have trouble overthinking things, or the fear of, what it's going to be like. But I think we can minimize those feelings when we just focus on one step at a time, and not thinking, 2 weeks, 2 months down the road of how it's going to play a role in our life. Just focus on, how can I implement this sort of change in my life today? What's that look like?
So I love this step of starting small. And to me, this is like such a huge, huge part of changing yourself that people just have a really hard time getting. And I get it. We're in a society where it's like, go big or go home, right? I want to hit a button and I want to have it all. I want to have my food delivered. I want to have everything I could possibly think of delivered. I want to have myself delivered in a car. I want to have information at my finger. Like, and I think it's very difficult for people, you know, to get that notion. But starting like that, you have to like start small. You can't have it all right then at the moment. Like, again, the law of compounding, like you're saying, being so important. If you just take one little step, it reduces the friction. It doesn't really seem like work, and it's not as scary, right? And it totally just simplifies the process to where now you've taken that little step. And I love that you use the word momentum because that's everything that I'm about. More momentum is like my brand, right? You're just building that little bit of momentum, and you're like, oh,
Right.
that wasn't so hard. I could probably do a little bit more. And then you do a little bit more, right? And then that just like a ripple effect kind of spreads to other areas, other actions. And then before you know it, you're like, wait, what was I so afraid of? But it's that initial step. It's going from A to B. Like, if you want to get to Z, first you got to go to A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D. And then your habits and your momentum start to kick in. And you're like, all right, well, this is what we do.
And it's at that point,
Z,
and I kind of had this thought the other day when I was like writing some stuff about the compound effect and consistency. And once you create that momentum, you'll realize that it's actually easier to sustain the consistency than it is to fall off and start again. So it's going to be much easier to keep going, even though it might not feel like it in the beginning. But when you start going, it's much easier to keep going every day, even if it's just a little bit of action, than it is if you fell off track and have to get the motivation, get the momentum again, and start to ramp yourself up. So the consistency actually becomes an easier baseline for you to live in than it is to constantly try to get yourself to get on track.
100%. And that all ties in again. That's momentum, that's habits. That's like you get into your neurons are literally, I mean, it's a scientific fact. Like, it's not like, although momentum is a cool thing because you can't touch it, smell it, hear it.
It's energy,
right? It's just, but we all know it's real. You look at look at any sports team. Like, how is it that one play can switch the entire dynamic to where now they're in control, where 5 seconds ago they were getting their butt whopped for the last 30 minutes? Like, so we all know it's real, but it's that initial little step and the importance of just getting into it. And then once you're there, habits don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting you. But once they're doing their thing, they're doing their thing. And like you said, then it's almost like hard not to, because you're like, well, your brain's like, this is what we do. This is who we are. But if you're just relying on willpower and you don't actually push through to make it a habit and start small, it's the best way to do that. I talk about, are you familiar with James Clear and BJ Fogg? So, right, he talks, so the two of them, I kind of combine the way that they both basically make it easy, make it obvious, make it simple, right? Make it attractive, satisfying, rewarding, like tricking your brain into being like, just, okay, what do we like? What's easy for us? Because again, what might be easy for one person may not be easy for another. So there is no generic advice here. It's customizing it to your own personal DNA, right? So it's like what might be easy to you, like you said, you used the example of going on a trip earlier. That was like you're sort of like that was pushing you to an edge of an uncomfortable thing. Whereas somebody else, they may travel all the time and they're like, well, what's the big deal? Like, that's what I do. I travel, right? But so their thing might be different that they need to push and they need to recognize. So it's different for everybody. And that's, that important step you said at the beginning, lead with curiosity. And the way I put it, again, universal principle, becoming aware. You got to be aware of yourself and your surroundings and where you want to go. And then the more you start to figure out your strengths, your passions, your weaknesses, your likes, dislikes, then it helps so much to be able to sort of customize like these things we're talking about to your DNA and your personality, to be like, okay, well, this is what's easy for us. This is a good first step.
This is a quote probably said by many people, but awareness is truly the first step toward change. Nothing can happen without any level of awareness. And that's, the first pillar in my book, You Deserve the Shit, is awareness, because that's where the journey of self-improvement, personal development, whatever word we want to use, that's where the journey always starts. You can't move forward without understanding both internal and external awareness, who you are, but also like the surroundings and environment you exist in. So I think you brought up a great point about that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to, okay. So we talked about good habits for the curiosity, the awareness with your curiosity bank. Is there anything else with that before I move on to our next question, that a habit that will help people become aware that you've developed, that you use in
No,
your
I feel
system?
like the curiosity bank is truly just a really good anchor when it comes to, you know, honing in on that awareness of things you want to change or try or do different. Just anything that really, catches your attention and you're like, that kind of interests me. I'll write that one down.
Yes. Sorry. I was just looking at a few comments from people.
No,
I
you're
got a
good.
question on the side that I'll try to get to shortly. So okay, and then for the action part, let's talk about that, because obviously I think we both agreed that you can be as aware as you want. I liked your quote by Jim Carrey about the eat. What do you say? You can you can't just visualize and then go eat a sandwich. So how do you get somebody to take action? Like somebody says, okay, I'm starting to figure this out. This is important to me. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what I want. They got the curiosity bank. They go, this is what I need to do.
Start with a plan.
Now what?
I feel like any sort of action, you got to make a plan. And so when you write down what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, the reason why that's important is because you create that contract with yourself. And studies show that you're actually 42% more likely to achieve your goals when you write them down. So this shows us that that is something that we need to lean into as a tool to take action. It's not taking action, because really taking action is doing the thing you want to do. Really, that's what taking action is. But you can't just tell someone that, because it doesn't serve anyone. Right. But there's a book I read called Creative Calling by Chase Jarvis, and the way he explained taking action has stuck with me. He says you must do the verb to be the noun. So if you want to be a writer, then you got to write. If you want to be a musician, you got to make music. And so that really shows that action is simply doing the thing you want to do, but that doesn't provide enough guidance, because then it's like, okay, well, how do I do the verb? Well, you make a plan. And so when I make a plan, I like to identify the end goal, or the change I want to make. So let's just say, for example, let's just use books. I want to read a book a month. We'll use that as the end goal. And then you have to identify the specific action steps that are required for you to be that goal, the end goal. So for example, let's say I'm reading, let's say the action steps are, buy the book. That's a great first action step. Create a reading space. And then maybe the last one is reading, 10 pages a day. And so those are your action steps that are required to get you to the output. So you're now focusing on inputs, which are you're in control of inputs. You're not in control of output. The only way you're truly in control of the output is by controlling the input. So that's why you got to focus on those action steps. And then the final piece, which I think is most important, and it kind of ties into time blocking, is you schedule when and where to take action in your calendar, just like you would a business meeting, or a hair appointment, or a dentist. Put in your calendar. So for example, if I'm reading 10 pages a day, every day at 7 p.m., that's in my calendar. So when it comes around to 7 p.m., it pings me, hey, you're supposed to be reading right now. And so that makes it a really tangible way to even have just some other, see it as accountability, to your own accountability partner. And I think that's really key to taking action, because a lot of times when we have to try to decide every day when to take action on the day of, that's when we get caught up in procrastination, overthinking. So if it's already planned the day before, or even further than that, and it's just in our calendar, that we know when and where to take action.
Love that. Yeah. So this ties to having a routine. I think routines are so important, and just having, so I break them into the morning, afternoon, and evening. And I actually have, speaking of writing things down, I have it written down where literally I have, and they're color coded. So I have if it's in red, that means that's a part of my routine that I consider a failure habit, and I want to turn into a green are the success habits. And then I have black, which are actually, they're neutral habits. We do have a lot of neutral habits in our life, just things that we do that is just part of what we do. And I look at those as opportunities, right? So for instance, we got to eat breakfast, but there's an opportunity there, to turn breakfast being a black habit into a green habit or a red habit. It's a red habit if you're eating, high sugar, salt, things that are, chemicals, stuff that's making you less healthy versus, you know, some stuff that's going to put energy in your body. And again, this is all personalized. So don't look at what somebody else is eating and be like, I need to eat that. But whatever tastes good to you, that's, you know, educate yourself, become aware that that's healthy and to put in your body type of thing. Right. And so you've got this routine that you're doing each day. And again, your brain just starts to go, okay, this is who we are. This is what we do. And it becomes kind of on autopilot. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And if you want to change your routine, like we were saying earlier, you want to start with small little steps. Like, you know, if you're eating sugar cereal every morning, you don't want to, you know, all of a sudden start eating, you know, one egg and a piece of lettuce. You know, it's like, okay, well, what's the transition there? Like, is it, you know, eating a little bit of less cereal, but then also adding a little healthy thing to it, right? And starting small. But then once you start doing those routines, then like you were just saying, it's like, then you get into a rhythm where all of a sudden you're doing things that are helping you, what you've recognized, you've become aware of are important to you. And now it's like, okay, you've got them written down there, you know what you're doing each day. Because that's another thing. A lot of people have no idea what they do every day, especially, I really just do my routine Monday through Friday, because that's kind of like, we all have like a Monday through Friday routine, I feel like, versus the weekends, all bets are off. But, you know, and so Monday through Friday, like, what do you do from the moment you wake up, right? Like, and so I used to, for example, I used to have a failure habit. As soon as I would wake up, I would grab my phone and I would start looking at news. And my phone started, and this is back when Trump was president, and don't get me started. I was just so furious about everything that was happening and all the politics and everything. And I was just like, I just want to, like, I would, like, after 10 minutes of lying in bed reading these articles, I would want to, like, murder somebody. I'm like, this is not starting my day in a good way, right? So then I actually switched that habit. Now it's a green one to, there's this app called Flipboard, and you can choose exactly what you want to see, and it only shows you that, right? So I choose, you know, stuff on habits, behavioral science, happiness, you know, these types of things. And so that's what I now read when I get up, right? That's just a perfect example of, like, so many people go through their life and they just don't even realize these little things that they're doing that are hurting them. But if you write it down and you mark them down and say, okay, this is my routine each step of the day.
I think that's, you know, that's a good point. I like the kind of color coding and framing them in that way, and helping, again, bringing that awareness to the unconscious habits that we have. You know, those, a lot of times, both neutral and failure habits, you might just be totally unaware of the fact that they're happening. I know I had a similar habit, like you mentioned, with going on my phone for probably a long time without even realizing that was the first thing I did when I woke up. And that, you know, it had a huge impact on my mental health, had a huge impact on my mood when I woke up. You know, I was starting at this lower level of vibration because I was waking up and rolling over on social media with the intention that the phone was supposed to wake me up because of the light, which is a terrible thing. Like, it didn't make any sense for me, because I thought the unconscious habit was me kind of reading low vibrational stuff, and I thought I was using my phone to wake me up, but really it was having a negative impact on me. And so that was a huge thing I cut out, because it was having such a big impact on my mood and where I started my day. So I mean, I think it's something that probably a lot of people can relate with.
Right. Awareness of just, like, right, we're talking about these actions you're taking during the day, and morning, during the day, and then at night. Like, we all have these actions we're taking, right? And so that first step is becoming aware of them, writing them down, and then you can slowly start to say, okay, this one ain't helping me. And, you know, you're one of the fortunate ones that recognize, like, I need to cut this out. But a lot of people, especially phone's a good example, because, I mean, we're all addicted to our phones. And to me, so again, in reducing the friction, and instead of just trying to, like, use willpower and be like, I'm not going to use my phone at all, to me, you know, and maybe some people can do that, good for them. But for me, like, I have to, when I wake up, and as I'm getting older, my eyesight's getting worse too. So now I grab my glasses, but I can't just jump right out of bed like I used to. I don't have, you know, I'm like, okay, 5-10 minutes. But if I'm looking at something uplifting that's, like, inspiring me and, like, giving me the ideas for the day and making me, like, building my momentum, then great. I'm using my phone for good versus evil. But if you're just going on down the social media rabbit hole, and all of a sudden it's like 2 hours later and you're like, what just happened? And I didn't get anything out of that, then
it all comes back.
That's when you're going to want.
And everything in life is intention. what are you leading with good intention? Are you leading with bad intention or unconscious attention? It's the same thing, but intention, I think, is a very important thing to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that ties to exactly what you're saying, like being aware of what you're doing and the actions you're taking. So you're not just taking actions and being pulled to, I guess one way to look at it, right, is a lot of people, I feel like their actions are based on outside influences that are dictating their actions versus intentional actions are, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want. These are the actions I'm going to take. So, well, this has been great, dude. I like to end. You've given us some good habits. Is there any one habit that you would say before the accident that you had that you have now changed since the accident that is really, other than, and it could be one we've already talked about, actually, if it's like your number one biggest, but I always like to, when I'm interviewing successful people that are doing their thing, like the number one habit that they've developed that maybe they didn't used to have, but now they have, and it's just like, it's kind of
time management is huge for me. Being an author, being an editor at Forbes, being a public speaker, there's a lot going on in my world. And using time blocking has been like my key to being able to manage my day effectively and being able to put intention into each area without having to worry how I'm going to actually get it completed. So that's going back to the scheduling part. I have specific slots in my calendar of what I'm doing basically at every minute of every day. And maybe it was, a little hard. It's a transition. Any new habit's going to have a transition, but once it becomes a habit, that's just now the way I couldn't live without it. I literally can't. So, I have my morning routine in there. I have my gym in there. I have breakfast. I have this call. I have a meeting. I have lunch. Every single thing. I have a walk. I put it in my calendar because I know if it's not in there, I'll spend too much time sitting around going, what was that thing I was supposed to do today? And then, I waste 20, 30 minutes trying to remember and getting sidetracked and procrastinating. So this really helps me just like stay on course.
I like that, putting it in your actual calendar, right? So I was saying I have a routines list, and it's a separate list. I actually review it every morning. I used to. I'll be honest, I don't anymore because I feel like I have it now, and I know the parts of my routine that I'm trying to change. Versus in the beginning, there were so many different things, like you're saying. But I like the idea. That's a little habit hack, in my opinion, a little gamification technique to sort of put it in your calendar. That way, it's like it's right there, and it's going in order. And if you're like, what was I saying? You just can pull it up right then and there. And you can kind of also, I like the idea it's tied to time. So you can kind of see, am I off schedule? Am I on schedule? Right? You're looking like, okay, I read for 10 minutes every morning, and you're like, okay, that's usually at 8 a.m. It's now 8:30. Oh, I'm a little behind. I need to, move a little bit quicker. And I also like the time. Can you tell me, is that time blocking you mentioned? Is that
time blocking is the same thing. So it's just creating blocks of time for a specific task. So I think the key thing to remember is each block of time should only have one thing you're working on. So, for example, tomorrow, let's say at 8 a.m. I write my newsletter. So from 8 to 9, I'm only focusing on one thing, and I move on from the newsletter once it's completed or the time block is up, and then I move to the next time block. And so this helps you just continue that forward motion through your day, completing the tasks you need to complete while not trying to multitask and then becoming less efficient.
Well, I like that. Let me ask you about this as we're wrapping this up. Are you familiar with habit stacking?
Familiar. Not in like I'm not purposely like stacking habits, but I'm to be honest, my routines and stuff is days are so dialed to this point, like things just kind of happen naturally because I'm so right. I haven't had to like really lean into habit stacking to build a new habit lately.
Right. So for the audience listening, habit stacking is basically the gist is, and this is comes from James Clear, but he actually got it from somewhere else. But I think he's the one that kind of uses the term. But it's basically when I do X, there's a certain activity that you're already doing, like that's part of your routine. You already have the momentum of that habit that you do every day. Then I'm going to also do Y. Or right after or simultaneously. And Y is the habit that you
Mhm.
want to do, that you want to build, right? And I think it's genius. I use it like a mofo, and you probably use it without even really thinking about it too much. It sounds like if your
Yeah.
routine is that dialed in, where, for instance, like, you know, my morning shower routine, like that was a black neutral habit, basically taking a shower. I guess you could call it green because it's good to shower, but for the most part, we all shower in the morning. It was, you know, I just have a shower. You can either just sit there, you can start thinking about negative stuff or dreading the day, right? Or what I've turned mine into is I've memorized my mantra. So I say my mantra to myself immediately after I say what I'm grateful for. And as I'm doing both of these, I'm actually doing my stretches, which I've timed perfectly to where my shower and my mantra, my grateful list, and my stretching is all within this like 4-5 minute period. And so I get out of the shower, I'm like, let's fucking go. Like, I'm just fired up, right? And it's like, I just habit stacked. I just took a routine habit that I was already doing, and I added in these things that I wanted to do, where I was like, when am I going to have time to say my mantra and what I'm grateful for? Like, what's a good time to do that? And so you're just kind of stacking them in because you already have the momentum of doing that one habit. Now it's just adding a few more things on there so that you can
I think it's a great way to, you know, try to get those new habits into your routine.
It's good stuff.
You're
Well,
welcome.
dude, thank you so much, Jordan, for being on. There's so many nuggets. I've been taking notes as we go here. And we're going to clip out some pieces and we'll repost and stuff. Where can people find you?
On Jordan Tarver on Instagram and TikTok. Pretty active on both those platforms. We got a ton of free resources through the link in bio on either of those platforms. So, you know, check it out. And my DMs are always open too. So if you have any questions, hit me up.
Well, great chatting with you, brother. Let's keep in touch. Always nice to meet a fellow person.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So thanks, man, for being on the show.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
That's it for the Gamify Your Habits podcast with Will Moore. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to visit moremomentum.com to learn how you can gamify your life.